people can turn on their video or whatever. So, all right. So, excuse me.
Awesome.
All right. I'm going to kick us off, and then we can just kind of go from there. Sound good, Mark?
You're good.
Excellent.
How you doing?
Excellent. All right. Hi, I'm Tom Henricksen from the DevOps Online Summit. I would like to welcome you to Mark Peters. Welcome Mark Peters to the February edition of the DevOps Online Meetup. And this is for the DevSecOps Track discussion. Just a reminder that the DevOps Online Summit is coming up April 26th through the 30th. So, and Mark's going to talk more about this here in a second, but our call for speakers is out at bit.ly/DOS-CFS. So we want to talk about that. But Mark, first off, why don't you introduce yourselves, and then let's talk about this amazing track you're organizing.
So I hope it's going to be amazing. It's only amazing if we get good participation, right? Because it's the speakers and the interaction that make our tracks amazing, more so than me making the track amazing. I'm just correlating the information. But Dr. Mark Peters, retired Air Force, a couple of years back. I'm working as the lead information assurance and security engineer on a U.S. Air Force cyber weapon system, which sounds really cool. It always sounds cool when you say weapon system, and then having spent time in the Air Force, you realize that weapon system means it's a budgetary line they draw around it so they can get funding for everything. I work with the DevOps Institute as a DevOps ambassador. I'm also the USA chapter chair for our meetings in the US. So that's pretty fun as well. We get some good conversations going off their skill up days, which they do monthly.
Yep.
But today I'm here about the DevSecOps track. Really what we want to get is some people talking about better ways to integrate security and better ways to bring all the dev and the ops and the security folks together. If you've got some good ideas, if they've got some lessons learned, if they just want to share or offer functions, because it covers such a wide space of functions. Because you first talk about trying to get the teams integrated. That's always the biggest challenge for a lot of people, is how do I get my teams to work? How do I get those security guys that have been doing compliance for 20 years and have been locked back in their closet, to do development and to work with the operational folks to deliver things along? So I think that's a major hurdle. The other one is the side of that is that when we talk about information security, too often we get these people who are good developers and they're in the track and they say, well, if you want to move ahead, you should go into information security. So they go into information security and they spend a couple years walking around the floor of the SOC. And then they say, hey, you really understand that. Move into compliance. And then they move into compliance and they stop touching the machines and they stop touching code. And they get really good at compliance, but all of a sudden they don't understand the current tech. It all flows through those discussions. I mean, I'd love to talk to some people that are working with Open Policy Agent, with the OPA considerations to do configuration, because that's a big part of it. There's a lot of those that we can change into working compliance. I'd love to talk to people that have seen operational issues or seen, just how they fit security in, what their thoughts are for the best ways to kind of do those things.
Yeah. So we have a few people here who have joined us. We have Randy, Punit, Srikanth. If you guys want to turn your video on, you can, or if you want to ask a question in the chat, if you think Mark will bite. I don't think you'll bite, right, Mark?
Oh, no questions. Why else would we be on an online meetup? Questions, right?
That's right. That's right.
I love questions. I love, Tom, you put out this format too. Is going to be a lot of questions. Normally, you speak and you don't get any interaction, and you do your virtual format and they pre-record it and then you play it, and you can pop up later. Yep. Well, I know this year we're doing kind of the same thing. This is my first time being a track chair for you, but you're going to give your speech and we're going to sit there and we're going to talk about your speech or your presentation, your slides, and talk about some of the issues. And then we're going to pop back up and chat during the actual event. And answer some of those questions about the ongoing. So you kind of get multiple levels of chat, just like multiple levels of security along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, Mark. It's been great, and I forget who suggested this, but a few years ago, we added the Slack channel, and the discussions that we get are so amazing. I love it that we get, people like yourself, the speakers, and people, just the people that are joining us, coming in there and having great discussions about all sorts of things in this DevOps space. So it's a lot of fun.
GitLab Commit actually did that back this past summer, where they had you pre-record it and then they had you come in as a speaker and kind of chat along the way. Yeah. And it was nice because as you were going through it, you could actually pause the speaking for yourself and ask the speaker questions and then go back and hear the rest of their conversation. Later on.
Yep. Yeah. It's a good way to, interact with people, especially as we have kind of global audiences in the virtual realm. You know, you don't know what time, it might be morning for you, Mark, and somebody else might be about ready to go to bed. And, they might watch a little bit and then maybe catch more of it in the morning or want to see what's going on in the chat. So.
Absolutely. And if people have questions, I've had a couple of people reach out and ask me questions about it along the way. I'm at the @tinycyber on Twitter. And then you can find me on LinkedIn pretty easy as you go through it. But any of those things will work. And I think all our addresses are in the announcement for the speeches as well.
Yep.
For the tracks.
Yep. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to join us. I know we have a few people here, and I know we had a lot of the people register. So if people come watch this later, we're going to put it on YouTube so people can check it out. If they have any questions, they can feel free to reach out to me. I have my email address all over the place. And of course, Mark's available too to answer questions and kind of help people understand the track. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you kind of came into the DevSecOps space?
So I came in, I started with the weapon system. I worked as intelligence in the Air Force for a long time. And so working in intelligence, you do a lot of getting the right products to the guys in ops. And in our case, the ops guys were dropping bombs, but it was still the same type of focus, right?
Yeah.
When you think about, we were developing something for them to use. And then we had to meet the compliance guidelines. And when I got out of the Air Force, I wanted to move more into the cybersecurity realm. I wanted to do more of the cyber. I'd actually been at NSA for a little bit when they first stood up Cybercom and got into those realms. So I did a lot with integrating between the cyber and between the intelligence functions there when they first started up. But when I started seeing DevOps, I really enjoyed the interaction. And the whole thought of working with Agile and working with DevOps to create that flow feedback and that continuous experimentation is really the heart of it. And I've done a lot of that with military planning and military experimentation. How do we get these things moving faster? And I think that's one of the best parts is taking that small work, using your Agile strictures of maximizing the work not done. How do I get a minimum viable product every time so that I can keep moving the bar forward, right? I think too many people get wrapped around the axle of, I have to have this end product at the end of a year. I have to have, this big, huge thing. Well, don't worry about that. Worry about what you got this week and next week and make that little bit compliant, make that little bit secure, and then keep making those small steps. And when you get to the end of the year, you're going to look back and you're not even going to be able to see where you started from because you're going to have made so much progress.
Yeah. Now I know, Mark, I've worked not with the, with the military, but other federal agencies, and with the way they, I've seen where they've changed a lot of the way they're doing business, but talk to us a little bit about how the military is kind of shifted with things like DevOps and agility.
So always one of the favorite topics, right? And it kind of goes back and forth. And it's the same type of change that you see in a lot of large enterprises, fortunately or unfortunately, is that you make a DevOps change in a small section of your group, and then the rest of the section doesn't buy it. So it still slows down.
Yeah.
And you see the same thing in the federal government, that they say, we want to do DevOps here, but oh, by the way, you still have to meet these compliance regulations and you still have to meet this administrative paperwork.
Yeah.
So when we're working with folks, they're like, well, we want to go faster and we want to get you to release on demand. But every time you release on demand, we need 400 pages of administrative approval for your release on demand.
Yeah.
Well, wait. I'm not sure you've thought this through, right? If you got to do it, you got to move everything forward. And then you've got to trust. You've got to be able to build into the continuous monitoring spaces. And you've got to build into those functions. I'm working with a company now, Technica Corporation. Like I said, we're working on that cyber weapon system. And we've actually delivered 4 releases in the past year. Well, we took it on as a new contract a year ago. Yeah. The contract before them had made just barely one release at the start. When they came in, they took some old stuff, they packaged it up and they sent it back out and said, that's our release. And 2 years later, they were still on that same platform and they hadn't made their next release because they were looking ahead. So with 4 releases, we've gone exponentially far ahead.
Yep.
And that's even with the authority to operate in all those functions, because ours is really constrained. I tell you, I said cyber weapon system, and it sounds like a experimental thing, but really what it is it's kind of a secondary SOC. It's a vulnerability analysis and hunt capability.
Yep.
And they come in on the outside and they double check what the other guys are doing. So they're looking for things that your normal internet crew doesn't have enough time to think about or to look through or have the tools. And they're using normal tools. They're using an elastic stack to pull everything in. They're using it through Kibana and just looking at it different. So we're actually constrained by the fact that we have to release hardware at the same time we release software because all the software has to fit on it. So it's a good and bad, right?
Yes. Excellent. Well, hey, I just want to ask Punit or Randy, Srikanth, if you guys have any questions, feel free to, you can turn your audio on and just ask, or put it in the chat, turn your video on and join us. Feel free.
It's slow. There's not a lot of questions. We understand. Sometimes these things just go forward. So, and that expands to topics we like to see, like continuous security is always a big one. Mark Hornbeek talks about that a lot in his DevOps engineering book, right? And he's got a lot of great ideas. And if you talk to him personally about just all the different functions that you have to do along the way to make those things happen, because you have to have a little bit of everything. And when you think about security, you can apply it at any stage. I mean, our typical pipeline runs, we run a sonar cube for kind of the code smells and those things at the front end, right? And that's kind of your static, making sure the code is good. And then because it's government, it runs a dynamic scanner, an ACAS scanner. Later on in the pipeline, when they start committing their code, we've had an ongoing debate with the developers. And this is one of those things that happens in security, right? We said, well, did you put security in the pipeline? They're like, yes, we did. We said, okay, so you've got what running in the pipeline? They said, well, we've got ACAS. We've got this tenable scanner that's running, and it's finding all the flaws in the pipeline. So, okay, great. What happens when it runs? So, well, when it runs, we pass the test. So, well, it's not quite, we're not quite where we're supposed to be, right? We've got to do a little bit more than that. So we're doing the outside scans from security and getting them the results and saying, here are the things to fix. And they're doing a great job of fixing those things and bringing them down. But it's still the question of, just because you have a security tool doesn't necessarily mean that you're deploying a secure product at the end. There's still a couple more steps in there. You actually have to fix those holes. We can't just rely on the tools and they don't do everything for us, right? Right.
That's why I remember early on in my development career, I worked for a company that was an internet company, and they had a product on the internet, and we had a security issue, and they had some people come in and do some training, and that was kind of a different mindset for some of the developers to think about, what could somebody do if they, put certain things in your fields, and, things like SQL injection, and, that's quite a few years ago, but, I'm sure the vectors and changes they've done since are a little bit different.
Well, and we talk about a lot of times, and like you said, they want to make security more complex. And we want to say that it's tougher than it is. But the things we need to do for security are the same things we need to do at that basic level. We just need to keep doing them over and over. We need to make sure that we don't put the secrets in the hard code, right? That we don't have these open vulnerabilities. That if there are patches, we install up to the latest patches. I mean, you talk about SolarWinds and all the problems we have with SolarWinds. It was like, well, we had a vulnerability, but it was from this month to that month. So if you actually made your patch on time, you probably would have gone right past it and not even noticed that it was
an issue
in your process or an issue for you, right? So how do we simplify it for the people that have to do it so that we know how it works? I think it was Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, Outliers, famous one in the 1990s, right? Talking about perfect practice, and you have to do something 500 times to get basically familiar with it, 5,000 times to get some kind of proficiency with it. It's the same type of thing in security. If we're constantly jumping to the next new thing in the integration, then nobody can keep up with us. So we've got to make sure that we're doing those same basics over and over again. And it's the same for developers and operators. They've got to work through those same standard processes, those same standard people that they talk to, so that they can advance in their practices.
So as you work with, say, maybe people that are a little bit new to your process, Mark, what are some of the stumbling blocks they come upon, as they're trying to develop with security and really have a good understanding of some, like you said, those basic principles?
Well, the first one is always that, like we said with the closet, right? Security is the department of no. If I ask security, they're going to tell me no. So I'm not going to ask security. So we made a real effort to get our security folks down in the development teams. Now, I've got a much smaller security team than the development teams, but one of each of my folks is in one of each of our development teams, which is about 5 teams overall. And I even sit in one of our development teams on a daily basis. And I go to the daily scrums and I listen in and I make suggestions and I say, hey, this is what we need to do. This is probably where you need to go. And we advocate too that, we're on the same team as them. We're all there to deliver business value and deliver that value to the customer. And by being on the same team, that means when they give me something and it's not quite right, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to advocate that it is right to the next set that has to do the check. But then I'm going to come back and tell them, you could do a little bit better. We need to close some of these holes. We need to make the code a little bit tighter. We need to make sure that we're getting rid of the tech debt. We're moving things forward.
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate, and people say that security likes to stay at the back, right? Security likes to stay, and they like to use the stuff they know and the legacy things because we've checked them all down. I like to advocate for the other way.
Yeah.
If we keep moving forward, if we're on that front edge and using the newest stuff, by the time the people that are looking at it to break it, put holes in it, we're already on to the next thing. So we're past their fixes. And that's where we'd like to be. We'd like to be so far ahead that we're telling you what the holes, we're telling the security scans and the security companies what the holes are in ours after we've already moved past them.
Yeah.
Because we found them, rather than having them come to us and tell us, hey, it's time to patch.
So as you say, you have someone who's new to this space, Mark, to get into DevSecOps. What would be a resource or maybe something you would suggest to them to kind of get a good understanding of it?
So the first is the Phoenix Project, right? You got to go with Gene Kim's The Phoenix Project.
Yeah.
If you haven't read the Phoenix Project, then you haven't made that initial step.
Yep.
And then if you make it through the Phoenix Project, which is pretty easy because it's fictional, the DevOps Handbook is the next one.
Yeah.
And then the Engineering DevOps that we already mentioned with Mark Hornbeck. If you can get through those 3 books, you're fairly well on your way to understanding what the process is.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark's book is pretty thorough, isn't it?
Yeah. He's got a lot of charts. He's actually got a website out there too, where you can go out on his website and you can pull some of those charts for your own use.
Oh, okay.
And the important part is that it's all different every time you go. Every team is going to have a different set of challenges around what they do. But that basic DevOps mindset of that flow, feedback, and continuous experimentation gets there. If you think about how do I move it faster, that we're all part of the same team and we're all trying to get to the same end. I think Mark Schwartz wrote a good book too about, was it War, Peace, and IT? Was one of the recent ones. And then he had Sooner, Safer, Happier, I think was another new one.
Yep.
So those are both good ones that'll get you through.
Yep.
And get you some understanding. And then understanding, just looking at some of the challenges that other companies have faced. Reading biographies of people that have been there. Reading, I'm about halfway through the Netflix book, so I can't recommend it yet. It was on my list for a while, but the Reed Hastings about Netflix and cultural things. Some of the cultural changes they made there. Yeah. But it really is saying that it really is a cultural mindset that you have to be into the team mindset. You have to be into the whole framework and be able to make those advances. Yeah. And ask questions. Right? Like we're doing here, like we'll do at the track, like we do a lot of places. Watch some of the people do the conversations. The DevOps Institute has their skill of days every month. You can hop on those and somebody will answer questions and help you out. Find a way to chat. I've had some great conversations with some of the fellow ambassadors and just some of the people that have wandered through the various
events,
DevOps Institute things.
Yeah, Jane and Helen do a great job at the DevOps Institute. They have a lot of great events, so they're a good resource. Yes. So Mark, I want to ask you, you kind of alluded to this as you've been in this space, in the security space and DevSecOps now. I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the biggest change over, your time in this space?
So I haven't been in this space very long. I'd like to say I've been in the planning space and I've seen the military development. And I've seen the planning side of it for a long time. But I think there's been a flow. There's been a lot of people. One of the challenges I think is that people want to pin DevOps as a methodology, right? You see a lot of now, can I get a DevOps engineer? I'm looking for a DevOps engineer. Well, I don't need a DevOps engineer. I need an engineer who's willing to make the cultural change to DevOps.
Yeah.
And that too much is, even in the vendors, you see, well, I can offer you a complete DevOps pipeline. So, well, you can give me a pipeline. And that pipeline will probably work for my software, but it's not necessarily a DevOps pipeline, because I still have to remove that engineering review board, and I have to streamline that change control process that I have in there. And that too many of those things go in. So I see these organizations, I've seen 2 governmental contracts now, and they want to do DevOps and they say they're doing DevOps, but as soon as they start getting challenged, they fall back to how do we do it the old way?
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. So I'm going to put a policy in place that's going to make sure you only do it this way.
Yeah.
Well, that just broke where we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Even in our team, we're doing some good things very well, but they've had a temptation to move with a lot of governmental folks and a lot of contract folks to move into an engineering architecture team.
Yeah.
And the engineering and architecture team finds a solution and then hands it off to the dev team
yeah.
to actually do the work. It's like, well, that's kind of there, but I'd really like the team to do more of the work instead of somebody else to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Or instead of another one I've seen a lot in teams is instead of a peer review process where everybody's doing the work and everybody's jointly accountable for the work, and you have the piece you did, and then you go to a peer and say, hey, what do you think?
Yep.
They'll have a lead developer, and you have to go to the lead developer to get the check, to get the pull request, to get the
creates a
push to the
bottleneck.
next level.
Yeah.
And it creates a bottleneck, which impedes our flow, which constrains our operations.
Srikant, did you have a question? I saw you turn your mic off there. I just wanted to pause there. Maybe not.
It's accident.
Yep.
Inadvertent mouse click.
Happens to all of us. Happens to all of us. Well, Mark, we're so appreciative of your time and joining us. Any other particular items that you're looking for in your track, or things maybe you think would be a good topic or a question to answer?
I think we're willing to take just about anything. How your security team works, how your DevOps teams work with security, why your DevOps teams hate security. You know, why you don't need to be secure because it's all in the pipeline already.
Yeah.
Pipeline advances, like I said, there's a lot with open policy agent coming through. There's a lot with people that say they secure you already. We see a lot of runtime applications that are out there that are kind of combining things on dashboards.
Yep.
Even down to the infrastructure, right? If you can get the infrastructure and the configuration right, a lot of times you can get an early stop to some of the things that go through your process because they just won't run when you get to it.
Yep.
So working those tools in a development environment that mirrors your production environment, and a production environment that mirrors it, you know, your dev environment, because they're the same, is an advancement. So anybody who's got some good advice about doing those things and making those functions work together, anybody who's got new tools that they want to talk about, right? Or that they've tried to use something and they think it's great or they think it's terrible. I mean, GitLab always has new tools and new tries. CloudBees has new stuff out there that you can use. Puppet, Chef, Terraform, Argo CD.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go down names.
Lots of terminology.
Right? Forever.
Yep.
Every other day, somebody's hitting me up with a new system to do something for CI/CD and something for delivery that guarantees security.
Yep.
All the way across.
It kind of reminds me of Fred Brooks's No Silver Bullets that he had talked about years ago. And we still, it seems like there's always a vendor promising something that will be like, kind of like you mentioned earlier, you know, this is all the security you need right here. And it's like, well, you kind of have to ask the right questions and understand the whole process.
Well, and I mentioned, I've got a talk coming up in Bright Talk end of the month about metrics. And one of the first things is people want to know about advanced metrics. They're like, what do I have for advanced metrics? What kind of advanced metrics do I need?
Yeah.
And the first comment is, well, if you're still making gains, you don't need advanced metrics. You can use your lead time to change, your time to respond, your time to recover, right? Your time to detect are still your good metrics. And if those are getting you advancements, don't worry about getting advanced. Worry about making the gains until they start to slow down. I tell people it's the same thing as weightlifting, right? When you start out weightlifting and the first time you go and you touch a set of weights or you run for the first time, that first 8 weeks, you make some huge gains, right? You're making 20 and 30% over what you were doing before. But as you get better and you get closer to that top and closer to where you should be performing, you start making smaller gains. You start having to worry about things of, in running, am I swinging my arms across my body instead of straight back and forth?
Yeah.
Am I, where are my feet positioned when I lift the weight? Where are my hands positioned? How do I start? How, did I get enough sleep the night before?
Yep.
All those things are advanced changes, which are important, but they're not important until you get through the basics.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we only have a few minutes left here. I just want to thank you, Mark, for spending a little time of your valuable time here with the group and talking on the DevOps Online Meetup. So we appreciate you talking about your upcoming track. Appreciate your time.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Excellent. Before we head out, anyone have any questions or anything they want to ask Mark?
It's been a quiet group.
All right. Well, hey, everyone, we appreciate your time. I will be posting this on YouTube. Also, just want to give everyone a quick heads up. We're going to have another one of these next week. We have Craig Pearson is going to join us, and he has a SRE track. So he's going to talk to us about that. So you'll want to watch. We'll be emailing out the registration on that. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Mark. We'll talk to you all later.
Problem.
Thanks. Cheers, everyone.